Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and, with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone.
Welcome to Nightlight, everybody. So glad you could share your time with us this evening. I want to thank Ken Quiet Hawk for his amazing intro. You can find him and his wife, Deb, on the internet. Just Google Native Storytellers or Ken Quiet Hawk. You'll find their material. It's wonderful. It's amazing. It's informative. It's enlightening. And it helps to teach you another way of preserving history that has been used for generations before the written word. Tonight I've got a great guest with me. I have Monique Rebelle in here with me, and I think you're going to find her story and her book, Transcendence Calling, The Power of Kundalini Rising and Spiritual Enlightenment, fascinating. After years of struggle, she was on the verge of suicide. That's when she experienced a miracle that stopped her from ending her life and marked the beginning of a new, happy life. In Transcendence Calling, Monique takes us through some of the key events from her childhood and youth, the months before the experience, then describes the transformational Kundalini rising process and introduces a new, revelatory take on the chakras. Kundalini rising energy and spiritual enlightenment. Information about this phenomenon, rare but known for millennia, and in-depth explanation about it is written in an accessible language that relates to everyone directly. The capacity of our consciousness is far greater than what we are accustomed to using, and the potential for full regeneration and happiness lives within us. Transcendence Calling gives you the tools you need to engage in practices that will lead you to the realization of an amazingly powerful and beautiful existence. She was born in Warsaw, Poland, to a family of actors. She left Poland on her own as a teenager, beginning her starving artist existence in London, then moving to Amsterdam. For about a year, she also lived and worked in Paris. Her paintings from those years were done in a neo-expressionist style. She participated in numerous art shows in the Netherlands, and one of her paintings was purchased by the Royal Dutch Collection. After moving to the United States and settling in Los Angeles, an epiphany experience in 1988 made her art shift to a new, non-objective direction. In 1992, she experienced an even more profound, life-changing occurrence. Her recent book, Transcendence Calling, describes that experience and its results. She's an amazing lady with a profound story to share with all of us, and I think you would find the book phenomenal, spiritually insightful, and something to challenge you to move into new directions. So, Monique, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Thank you for this wonderful introduction. I'm very excited to be on your show.
Oh, well, I'm delighted to have you. I think that I think one of the purposes of our show is to put material out there to give people tools to continue their spiritual journeys in the direction or the level or in the way that is appropriate for them. And that's what your book does, and I think it's phenomenal. And, the term Kundalini rising, people hear it all the time, but they aren't really sure, I'm pretty sure, exactly what it means. You want to give us a short explanation as to what the Kundalini is and what the Kundalini rising energy can do to one?
Yes, of course, sure. So when I had my experience, I didn't know anything about, I didn't know the word Kundalini. I didn't know about Kundalini rising. Someone told me sometime before about chakras, and I didn't believe in them. So only after I had my experience, I did some research. It was still before computer age, so I did my research in libraries and purchasing some books. Not too many, but overall, I got a good understanding of what it was considered to be the subtle body and the whole structure of it, Kundalini energy and chakras. And also there is another element. It's a very basic description, but another element is the channel called Sushumna, which allows for the energy of Kundalini, which is resting at the bottom of the spine, to rise up and break through chakras, which are considered knots or energy centers or energy vortexes. And while the Kundalini energy is going up, it clears up all the chakras, and it exits through the top of our head, through the crown chakra. So this is the basic description of how this process takes place. But what it is really about, I will talk from my own experience, and that's what I'm doing. I only talk from my own experience, and I don't have a lot of I don't gather a lot of information about that whole spectrum of knowledge. There is a lot of knowledge about it. What I know is that, in my view, Kundalini is our consciousness, our individual unit of consciousness. This is what I call it. So what you are, you are your consciousness. And that word Kundalini comes from Sanskrit, because for thousands of years, probably at least going back 5,000 years before Christ era, people have been experiencing that incredible phenomena. And it means, Kundalini means coiled up. It could also mean fire, I read somewhere, which also works well for my own understanding. But the coiled up form, that's what it is called. That's the Kundalini. An idiot friend of mine told me that Kundali means still in Hindi. It means coil. So that's the energy. I read that Kundalini is considered to be maybe a feminine energy associated with the archetype of goddess Shakti, and there is a lot of iconography around it, and it has in Hindu religion or Hindu mysticism, it has that meaning of a certain power, feminine power maybe, but I don't see it that way. I see it as simply consciousness, individual unit of consciousness. And chakras that are Kundalini itself is at the bottom of the spine in the sacrum area. That's where it's resting. In our daily life, Kundalini is resting at the bottom of the spine. When I had my experience, I didn't know that the certain things that I did allowed for the energy to go up, to start going up, and I didn't know it was going up until I saw something that was very scary. It scared me so much that I wanted to run away, but I couldn't run away because it was moving with me. It was a beautiful rope of rainbow light that was purely science fiction. I knew it was real, and that was why it scared me so much, because it was real. And I saw it coming. It looked like it was coming out of me, and it was doing this wonderful dance. I was watching it, terrified, and so that's how I could tell that this is the Kundalini, beginning of the Kundalini rising experience. Chakras are considered to be energy centers, energy vortexes, and we know more and more about chakras in terms of especially people who practice yoga and who are interested in spirituality that comes from India. They know about chakras as energy centers, and each of those energy centers is connected with certain organs in the body, is identified by certain colors, and there are certain syllables attached to each of the chakras, and so on. From my own experience, when my consciousness was moving up, I could notice several different realms my consciousness was going through. And I wrote it down just to make sure that I won't forget what they were. I never forgot any of that experience, but I just wrote it down, and sometime later I compared to what's known about chakras. And the first two dimensions, as I call chakras dimensions, and I'll explain that in a moment. The first two dimensions, or the first two chakras, we don't really know very well when that experience is happening, unless Kundalini cannot get through the second chakra, which is very common if anybody has that experience and experiences pain in the lower back, heat in the back, and moments of stiffening of the body. These are often symptoms of Kundalini rising that are physical, so they have to do with the physical body. And so they have to do with the first chakra, and as I call it, the first dimension. So in my experience, chakras are opening us up to dimensions of perception. So you can say that instead of using the word chakra, you can use the word dimension. And when your consciousness is moving up, it explores each of those dimensions until it's free to leave through the top of our head. And then that energy circulates. It looks like an image of I think it's called Taurus, the picture of energy circulating around. That's when the process of spiritual enlightenment is in the moment. So when all the chakras are open and a person can experience life on all of these dimensions of perception, on all the 7 dimensions. Is that an explanation that makes sense?
Yeah, no, of course. It does. And I think one of the most fascinating things about your book, quite often, without realizing, we're doing something. We do something that is amazing and takes us into levels and dimensions and areas of wisdom that we hadn't intended to go in. And one of the things that I have personally found is that to be creative, whether it's painting or writing or drawing or gardening or what, to be immersed in a creative process for any length of time is one of the best fuels for spiritual development there is. And
exactly.
quite often people like you are drawn to something that is of a creative nature, and there's no way of explaining why. But from a very early time frame, you were involved in art or dancing, or you were always involved in something that was of a creative process, and that, to my mind, in my experience, that's what fed this transformational process that you went through, without you intending. You weren't saying, I'm going to be an artist so that my Kundalini energy will, burst to the top of my head and change my life forever. But that's really what happened, and it's on some level of your consciousness, you had to know that this was important fuel for you, because you gave up a tremendous amount in your life in order to become an artist. Right.
Yes, I decided to become an artist when I was 14. And I know that I had many other options. I had other possibilities and other directions I was very interested in. The first one was acting, because both of my parents were actors, but my mother forbade me. I was not allowed to have anything to do with acting, and I was not allowed to study music. I was not allowed to sing. So it was strange, of course, but I always wanted to please my mother. It was a difficult relationship, and I was still very young when I was 14, when I decided that I'm going to be an artist, and whatever it takes and whatever art form it will be, this is what I'm going to do. And for a time being, I thought also about becoming a scientist, but I thought science is a little too rigid, that I thought that ideas that and the results of artistic investigation can take us places that are much less predictable than scientific research. So it just, to me, it had more freedom. There was more freedom in making that choice to do art. And I remember when I was 14, I just decided that this is what I was going to do. And I was hoping that the answers to my questions I would find in art. I believed in that. Somehow I believed in it. So this was my drive, and I started painting oil paintings when I was 14, and it only later I fell in love and had my daughter, and my base of being an artist was already there, and I didn't want to let go. I wanted to stick with it. And one of the other reasons why I wanted to stick with it is because my family life was broken. My parents divorced pretty much as soon as I was born, or maybe a couple of years later, and I barely knew my father. And there was something there that made me, something in that situation that made me independent. At some point, I even kind of rejected family in a way, and just went my own way and was just doing my own thing without relying on anybody or anything. And I think that's another reason why the experience that happened to me could happen was because I was on my own without anybody and anything. I kind of rejected the world in a way, not in a very angry way, but in more like a philosophical way. I just wanted to find out on my own.
Well, a spiritual journey is a solitary journey. And
exactly.
What I find fascinating, when one looks at your life, in many ways, you were either isolated by people or by yourself. You basically were not really influenced by groups or individuals at all. You did your own thing in your own way, and you did. I mean, you jokingly said starving artist, but I think you probably were starving from time to time. Not that your artwork, wasn't good, because anybody who's listening on Blog Talk can see your artwork scrolling on the top of the show, and your artwork is beautiful. And I think the other thing that I find fascinating is that another tool that is an almost must for anybody who's on the spiritual journey is the element of meditation. And without calling it meditation, you blended within the paintings. You went within them. You went within. There was a tremendous amount of meditation involved in your artwork without calling it meditation.
Yes, exactly. I never called it meditation because I could not relate to the word meditation. I couldn't sit still for a minute. I'm not someone who is able to do that. I could only sit when I was looking at my painting. And this is one of the I often mention in the classes I teach, is that we are all practicing subconsciously. We are doing things that maybe defy rationality sometimes, and others, especially younger people, want to do things that maybe they don't seem like the necessary or right or rational thing to do, but we do them because something else is telling us to do them. And it's that intuition. It's that sixth dimension, sixth chakra, which is telling us things faster than our mind, which is the third chakra, tells us, than the life that we know as we know it, as we know through history and science and our ancestors and our situation, the reality that we know, understanding of it through the mind is not as quick as it is through intuition. We just don't consciously practice intuition. And so I also teach about that. I teach how to cultivate for chakras and how to train the lower one.
I think that it's phenomenal the way that you have naturally flowed into all of these different aspects. I mean, people pay money to be taught this, and you are definitely self-taught. There's no doubt about it. But it's almost as though, I want to say you had a calling, but I guess we all have callings. But it almost feels as though you were driven to find a way to express yourself, and you really sacrificed a great deal in order to develop these aspects of yourself, and never did it sound like you were doing the painting or doing the work or doing to evolve a spiritual part of yourself. That's the cool thing. You were not trying to make transcendence happen, but you were fueling it beautifully as you went along.
Yeah, that's very right, and I think that's the truth about many practices is that what's important is the practice itself, not the result. So say someone wants to achieve spiritual enlightenment and he just wants to get there, but it's not about that. Spiritual enlightenment is not going to happen just because someone wants it to happen. It's going to happen when the right practice is done, and that practice might not look like nothing like spiritual enlightenment. That practice is often very repetitive. Could be it could look like madness. It could look like something really ridiculous. I myself, when I painted for so many years, I never did it because I wanted someone to like it. I was just searching. It was my own search. And at first I helped myself with just like many young people do, with being inspired by other artists. But that was just at the beginning. Then later, and you mentioned that I did go inwards, and I remember the first time when I consciously did that, when after years of painting in Western Europe, in Amsterdam and in Paris, I found out that the postmodern style or postmodern zeitgeist, you can call it, was too superficial for me. it was too much of social criticism, and I just got tired of it, and I wanted to feel inside. I wanted to find out what's inside of me. And that first moment when I tried, I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to go inwards. It was just such a question mark. It was like, how do you do that? How do you go inwards? And then I managed to, and I started to paint in a completely different way. I had some series of abstract paintings and that I did in Amsterdam. And then I got involved in the relationship and came to United States because my then boyfriend was from here. So that's how my life changed then. And then I started to go a little bit into the same style of postmodern art, because I ended up in Los Angeles and it was a new world, and I tried to understand it. And that's when that epiphany happened, that you said you experienced something similar, and I didn't know what it was, but I knew that I entered another dimension. Still didn't know what kind of dimension it was. Yeah.
But I think what most people who are consciously or who think they are on a spiritual journey don't understand the going within. You had the benefit of an art form to utilize as your pathway to go within yourself, to find out things about yourself, to let go of things or to soothe things, or to so that the journey that cleared the way for you, you had created for yourself unknowingly. The journey, the journey to self-awareness and transcendence and ascension, or whatever you want to call it, is knowing yourself and letting go of things that you've been carrying, letting go of the baggage, letting go of the trivia, and coming to know who the very naked you really is. And that's a very hard process. And again, your artwork gave you the channel through which to go, which was phenomenal. You want to tell them a little bit about your first experience with your feet never touching the ground happened?
Oh, yeah, sure. That was when I was 16. And for 2 years, I was already painting in oil, and I was studying history of art. And then one day I thought, I really would like to know about history of philosophy. When did it start? So I went to the library. It was a great library close to where I lived in Warsaw, in the center of Warsaw. And I asked the librarian about a book about the oldest accounts of philosophical thought. I really didn't know anything about it at that time. And I was given 2 humongous volumes of Indian philosophy. And I started to look through the first volume, and the texts were from Vedas. It was all very new to me, and I couldn't really focus on reading the descriptions of what was actually taking place at that time, but I went straight to the verses, the poetry. On one side of the page, there was a picture of ancient Sanskrit text written, I don't know, on maybe a stone or something. It looked like a photograph. It was photographs of those old texts. And on the other side, there was a translation. So I started to read. I think I read in Polish at that time, although I already could speak English then, but I read it in Polish, and it was so easy to read. And at some point I read about what is Brahman, and that was the all that is not moving, but it moves it all, something like that. That was more or less the description of what Brahman is. And then there was Atman. And Atman was described as an individual soul. And then another verse talked about the Atman at some point uniting with Brahman. It was the first time I ever read anything like that, but something happened to me. I just felt this incredible surge of joy, ecstatic joy, and energy inside of me was explosive. I had to get up, and I was afraid I was going to start screaming in the middle of the very, very quiet library. So I put the books away really quickly, and I ran out of the library room. It was on the second floor, I remember, and there I was facing the staircase, and I just dove in and barely held with my left hand the rail of the stairs, that rail, and I was just barely holding it. I was flying down so fast that I thought I found myself by the door, the exit door, within mere seconds. And at the same time, as I was flying down, I looked to the right on the wall, the right side of the staircase. It was just a wall, and I could see all the details of the painted wall, the little bumps on uneven surface, old paint showing through, little scratches. All that was in slow motion. I couldn't believe it. All I said to myself, I just said, remember this, and bam, I was just at the bottom of the stairs and opened the door, and it was just a bright day. I was flooded by sun, and people were moving, walking fast, cars. It was a very busy day, midday, I would think. Warsaw was at that time probably, over 1 million people. It was a very busy day, and there I was, completely disoriented, not knowing what to do, and I was just standing there, and then suddenly I noticed that I'm walking. I didn't even know. I couldn't feel it. I was hovering over the street. My feet didn't feel the ground. I felt like a feather. I was so light. I was just moving in one direction. I saw I was moving towards this intersection. And I was moving. I knew I couldn't stop moving. I knew I wasn't moving because I decided to move. I was just moving. And I was getting closer and closer to the intersection, still flying, basically, scared because what if I don't stop? I had no power to stop. I knew this is going to be terrible. The light is suddenly my feet stopped right at the edge of the pavement. I just stopped gently, and I still couldn't feel the ground underneath my feet. I was just standing there, but I was standing in the air. And then the light went green, and I just floated across the street, just like that. I couldn't feel the ground. I was just flying. I was so light. And then I was on the other side of the street, and suddenly I started to feel like I have weight. I landed. My body suddenly got gravity again, and I had weight, and it felt so clumsy. I regretted this moment of feeling my weight again. I just remember like today. It was amazing. I suddenly felt all clumsy. I just maybe my legs bent when I suddenly had my weight back. And then within a minute, probably everything became just like it used to be before, just normal. I looked around at the shop windows, and I just felt like I came back from a space trip. And I knew there was no one I could talk about it. Everybody I knew would think that I was completely nuts, and I didn't want to get into any conversation about that. I knew I wasn't. I knew that it happened. So 2 weeks later, I went to the library again, curious what will happen now. And I got the same book. And I read the same thing, and nothing happened. And then I looked further. I looked at some pictures, and there were pictures of chakras. All those old pictures that you probably know. It's a little guy with dark hair and mustache, and there he has all these things, all these round circles going along his body in the middle. And I looked at it, and I was 16, and I thought, oh, this is so funny. This is so people. So I knew that it was a picture from about 1,000 years BC. And I thought, wow, so those times people didn't know that we have all the organs inside. We don't have these little rings and things. we have liver and heart and intestines. And they thought that we have all that, and I was laughing at it. I was a little silly kid. So this is a confusion that I remember this because I knew what I was thinking at that moment. Even though it was after that experience, I couldn't understand that experience. I didn't know what happened, and it took 25 years or something. I was 35 when I had my experience in Los Angeles in 1992. So only then I realized what actually happened. I had my Kundalini rise up to the third chakra, which results in this great feeling, sense of full understanding and joy, ecstasy of being of getting it. That was what was so incredible about that feeling. It was like, yes, I got it! Wow! And that's when, yeah.
Is this when you finally figured out what was happening?
Yes, this is because I I never talked to anyone about that experience in the library. I never thought about it, really. I didn't know what to think about it. All I did is I put it in the memory box. You've read my book, so you know that from the earliest times when I didn't understand something, what the grown-up said, when something came up that I couldn't figure out, I just put it in that memory box. And then when time came, when I knew something more or I could explain it, then I would drag that question out from the memory box and clear it up. Yeah, but during the Kundalini rising, that's the incredible thing about this process.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I mean, what you had was a profound experience, and I think it was even more intense because of all the creative work that you had done that sort of opened the way for you. Not everybody has, I mean, most people look back on their childhood and there are times when it was good and not so good, and, you know, or it was easy and not so easy. You were, from a very early age, pursuing creative endeavors that followed you throughout your entire life. Not everybody has that opportunity. So that when you were clearing your chakras with the Kundalini energy, there wasn't as much to clear as if you had not had the experience until you were older. I mean, most people today who are on a spiritual journey really look at, you know, okay, Kundalini rising is something I want to experience. But there's I think the thing that's so important for everybody to understand is this is not something that is taken lightheartedly. It's a very serious pursuit. Kundalini rising energy can be even painful, and you have to be ready to literally bare your soul. And,
of course.
But it's sort of like childbirth. I can only speak from personal experience. It's painful as heck, but at the end you have a miracle in your arms. My miracle took 72 hours. That's why I only have one child. But it's something that you know you get into, and then you think maybe this isn't such a good idea, but you're already into it, so you keep going. Striving to have this kind of enlightenment takes a great deal of commitment, and you certainly had it. You continue to have it, and but it does clear the way for so much greater insight in life. Now, did all of this shift and change your artwork? Are you still doing your artwork?
Oh yes, I still do my artwork. In the past I was pressured to do it, and for many years, I counted, it was 17 years when I was just doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it, and I had successes with it, and I could observe a lot of interesting phenomena as I was doing it too, but it started giving back to me, if you know what I mean. It started giving back after 17 years of a very, very intense pursuit of me trying to find something in it. I didn't know how it would look like. I didn't know what it would be, but I just kept on doing it. Very often it was painful because I wasn't getting any results, but I was still working on it. And this is the thing about practice. We are in this life, in this reality, we are taught to do things on purpose. We are taught to do everything on purpose. And this is what our third chakra, the rational, linear mind, the logical thinking, wants us to do. This is the mind that strategizes, that plans, that organizes. This is the mind that takes care of our physical and emotional realities. But this is not the mind that can comprehend the upper dimensions, because there is a hierarchy in dimensions. So maybe I should explain what each dimension is in my view, because as we know, the general understanding of dimensions is that there is length, width, and depth, and then time is considered to be the dimension, right? Well, this is not
right.
how I see it, and all of that is it's from my experience. There is so much that I got from the experience that I was able. This book, Transcendence Calling, is about just a couple of angles on the experience, and one of them is understanding that our consciousness is multidimensional, that all there is consciousness. There is nothing but consciousness. And consciousness is everywhere in everything. There is nothing that has no consciousness. Have it a dust, piece of rock, dog poop, air, gas, anything. It's all consciousness.
Okay, and, good idea. So, I definitely go into the different dimensions, because I think that's a good idea.
Yes, I will. So, as humans, we perceive our lives through chakras, which open us up to the dimensions of perception. What you call spirit or consciousness or individual unit of consciousness, Kundalini, creates. First, it creates the subtle body and lodges itself in the material place, in the sacrum area, and that's the material world. First dimension, in my view, is all of the material world that includes our bodies, includes cosmos, includes everything that we can see or find under microscope, everything that science is able to find that's not necessarily visible, but that's all the first dimension. And the length, the width, and the depth, these are sub-dimensions of material dimension. So that's the first one. We can experience it through seeing, touching, smelling, hearing. We feel cold or hot, bodily functions. This is all experience of the first dimension. Sex is also in part experienced through the first dimension, and in other parts through the second dimension, which is feelings, emotions rather than feelings. Feelings I call mixture of the third and the second dimension, but just get to it in a moment. So the second dimension is emotional. This is all emotions. that range of emotions that we have, from feeling the worst possible to the best possible. We are experiencing, it's just a dimension of perception. It is different than the physical dimension, that the material world. Someone who is feeling sad can look at the beautiful sunset and not see its beauty because their emotional state is such that prohibits them to see what really is. And so it is. Each of these dimensions operates on a different principle. Now, from the material dimension, we can't see anything above it. But from the emotional, we can see itself. We know, feel bad or good or so-so or great, like it or not like it. That's basically what the emotional dimension is. We like it or we don't like it. I try to make it as simple as possible. From there, we can already see that, well, that water was too cold, I don't like it. So we know, we relate to the material dimension, react to it emotionally. Now, the third one above it is the mental dimension and the power of the will and the power of the thought. So that dimension of the chakra, that solar plexus chakra, located in the area of our stomach area, somewhere by the spine, supposedly. I haven't seen it myself, but that dimension is all about figuring things out, what to do, how to live, where to go, what to have for dinner, what school to go to, what bus to take, or what car to buy, where to go on vacation, what to do to get this, what to do to get that. It's a goal-oriented mind based on will and strategy, how to realize that desire of the will. It's connected with emotions, of course, because it reacts to our emotions. If we don't want to do something, it's dark, and we are afraid of dark. Of course, we're not going to be walking on the beach in darkness because we don't like darkness. Something like that. It's a very simple mechanism of relating to the physical, to the material world, and the emotional world. That's the third chakra. You can't see above from it, but you can translate some things, like, for example, love. We can assume that it has something to do with a relationship. But then again, it's not completely resolved as a question. There are so many questions that the mind, this reasoning mind, is not able to answer. And each of us has a different opinion. And each of us sees the world depending on what our conditioning is and the time, a subdimension of the third dimension. In order for us to be able to think, we have to have time. In order to make decisions and realize some of our plans and have activities and see things progress or regress or things changing and understand them, we need to have time. So time is also a concept that becomes clear. It is a concept only when your consciousness reaches the sixth dimension, the sixth chakra. So at the time when we are normally daily functioning in this reality that we know as physical, emotional, and mental predominantly, we have to rely on what we got, and there are variables of what we personally get. That's why there is so much misunderstanding. That's why we have so many conflicts, because of the viewpoint. That viewpoint is still the viewpoint of the limited vision of the first three dimensions. We are functioning in this reality predominantly with the first three dimensions, the material, the emotional, and mental. And the upper dimensions, we see as glimpses, and we try to translate them, understand them, and everyone has a little bit different take on it. So basically, our state of evolution right now on the planet is still within the ego. Ego is dominance of the first three dimensions. And each of us has that dominance a little different, and some of us have the upper chakras open. So we are not so constrained by our egos, but basically ego is something that gives us personality. That gives us the ability to function in this reality. But it's not all. It's not a complete being. Above the third dimension is the fourth, and this is where our human race has been touching upon that dimension over and over for thousands of years. Great spiritual teachers like, of course, Jesus Christ, like Buddha, they knew about that love. And other spiritual teachers also know about that love. That love is real. It's a dimension. The sacred love is a dimension that's above the first three. This is where the heart chakra is. Some of us have it open. Some of us have it closed. And this is what it is with the upper chakras. The first three, we have them congested with a lot of energy most of the time, because we don't practice consciously, only subconsciously. Some of us who are on the spiritual path are practicing more consciously to release the charge from the second and third chakra mostly, which is where the problems are. Because we can't see our individual unit of consciousness sitting asleep, slumbering comfortably in the sacrum area. That poor consciousness can't see beyond the emotions that have been compiling in our life for as long as we live. All these emotions are still there. And the thoughts in the third chakra, they're all there. This is what we think because of that, because of what happened in the past, because of what we were taught, because of our upbringing, because of our schooling, because of what happened to us. That creates our personality. And it's all there. All these thoughts are there. And I'm saying that because during my experience, I was able to release all of my thoughts. From the time I started thinking, all of them were resolved. They came up to the present time. And of course, we know about present time from our modern masters, the power of now and be now, be in the present, and everything else will be not important. Well, we also know how hard it is to not to be bothered by our thoughts that are there, still there, even if we try to be in present. Our structures, of mental structures that we are married to. We just can't change our minds easily. We can't, from Republican to Democrat, it's not just like one thing or the other way around. I'm nothing political here, but I'm saying if we talk one side, they'll be 100% sure of their right, and so it is with the other side, 100% sure. This is the ego. This is where our thoughts are stuck in the third chakra. And the fourth one is, yes, what teachers are talking about. They're talking about love. And it's true that if we have the second and the third chakra cleared up from the emotions and from the thoughts, from that congestion, and physical body, as long as we are healthy, it's okay. And it doesn't have to be really extreme health and extreme power. It's just healthy body, that's it. It's good enough. Kundalini is happy there, no problem. It's the second and third chakra that give us a problem of releasing allowing the Kundalini to go up. Because Kundalini always wants to go up. It always wants to. But, well, it creates the body. It creates the subtle body. And then it gets stuck in there, in that area. And our magical power it's hard to release it. It's hard to get it up through the chakras. Let's talk about the fourth a little more. The dimensions, they're always there. Whether we are alive or dead, the dimensions are there. The first, the material. The second, the emotional. They're always there. We just tap into certain kind of emotion. The third one, the mental structures and thinking, it's always there. That vibration is there all the time. And the same with love. Love is there all the time. And everyone, and everything is loved all the time. Everything is loved and loved madly, just like we always wanted to be loved, like we always dreamt of but couldn't even imagine it possible. We maybe associate our love with our partner, and it's a loving, beautiful relationship, only a reflection of the sacred love that's always there. And that presence, that I call presence, you can call it God, you can call it any kind of special power, spirit. That love loves us completely and also knows everything about us. So if we try to hide something, there is no way we can hide something from love, from that part of our consciousness or that dimension of consciousness knows about every single tear we shed, every little problem. It's all known. So this is the heart. It has to the heart. Other concepts besides love belong to that beautiful, eternal dimension. That dimension has no time. It's always there. It's eternal. It operates differently than the three dimensions below. It's always there, and we can tap into it, and we can practice opening the heart chakra by working on all these concepts that belong to that dimension, which is truth, health, of course, love, tenderness, justice, support, friendship, you can, goodness. There are so many words that belong to this realm of that vibration of love. So for us humans right now, we're just have been. And I remember in the hippie time, we were talking about love a lot. And now it seems like even more we are longing for being there. And it's not so hard to tap into it and be with that vibration and be out of the ego structure that keeps us doubting and uncertain and suspicious and all that, because that's how the mind is. Mind has to go that way, but love is different. So,
well, you're talking unconditional love here.
Oh yeah. It's absolutely unconditional. It's love for everything. It's love, just the love that we can practice, and practicing it and experiencing it is through giving it, and through contemplating those concepts and using those concepts in life, protection and benevolence and shelter and many different words. I have a couple of pages of those words.
Well, you're talking getting to a place where there is selflessness, unconditional love. You're talking a place where very few masters have actually gotten. I mean, a magnificent place to go, but being able to maintain that level in today's society is difficult. Not impossible, but difficult.
It is very difficult because we don't know what I have in that book is showing that these are dimensions that are always there. So love is always there. You have to choose to go there. And it's not so, and it's very hard to choose to go there if we don't practice on the lower chakras, if we don't train our emotional control. And I teach it just like it was during my experience, and as I practiced for years subconsciously without knowing that I'm actually controlling my emotions. So I was suffering terribly because I was not able to be with my daughter. And you know the story because you read my book. So you know I was simply separated from my daughter. And felt really bad about it and felt guilty about it, even though thinking it over and over and over made me understand that actually everything I did for the best of the situation that was at that time, and I did for her best too. I just hurt myself, and I thought that this was what I did was I thought that was the right thing to do at the time, but I still felt terrible about it, and it was a pain that I couldn't get rid of it for years. And I was practicing something that eventually, during my experience, just at the very beginning, I finally could see through it because I was practicing it very, very, very consciously without having the outlet of creating art at the time. I was just trying to stop myself from from feeling that hatred I felt towards myself and that violent urge to end my life. So I could see exactly how I was able to step out from that emotion, what process I used, and how I was able to find myself in that space of emptiness, which is what spiritual masters have been teaching, but no one yet has told where in the process of Kundalini rising, reaching towards spiritual enlightenment, where in that process that technique, that practice takes place. It takes place already in the second chakra. This is in emotional chakra. And before I go over to the fifth, sixth, and seventh, I want to say something else that I understood because of my experience. I understood that, as we know, spirit itself, that individual unit of consciousness, that soul, our soul, has no form. There is no attributes to it. You can't call it anything. It's just certain kind of energy. But once that consciousness creates subtle body with all of the chakras and lodges itself in the first chakra, in the physical body, that moment of creation of a new body makes our consciousness become survival, because we want to protect what we've created naturally. So we have survival instinct. The second attribute of our individual unit of consciousness is sexuality. We are sexual just because we want to procreate and keep growing, keep being here. It's a matter of it's kind of understood. That's the consciousness. Consciousness is all of the dimensions, but on a personal level, each of us is naturally survival, sexual, and the third element is creative. So spirit is creative once it is in the body. It becomes creative. And of course, in the lower chakras, in the physical, emotional, and mental, the survival, sexuality are more pronounced, and then the upper chakras support more of creativity. I'm saying that because understanding the common understanding of chakras is that second chakra is sexual and creative and emotional, but that makes things very complicated, and it's not workable. It just doesn't work. I just couldn't see it work that way. To me, the second chakra is strictly emotional, and the spirit itself, the consciousness itself, is survival, sexual, and creative. So from the fourth dimension, that's love, where we learn that love is there all the time, that each of us is loved, that it's not true that we are lonely without love, that no one loves us. No, we are loved all the time. Just need to tap into that dimension. Then there is the fifth one. This is this amazing dimension of sound and connection. communication, exchange of energy, communication with others, other human beings, relationships, and conscious relationships in terms of being already above the fourth chakra, that is from the fifth one you can see down through all fours. If the channel is open, the sushumna is open, the energy can go through to the fifth chakra. We are psychic. I became really psychic after the experience. I was off and on before, and after it was just amazing. I could tell what everybody was thinking. It was a little crazy that way. But this is the fifth dimension. It's all Akashic records are there. Everything is known. Whatever happened before, what's happening now, and what will happen in the future, all that is known in Akashic records. It's all there. And psychic powers is all communication with exchange of energy. We're getting a healing through it, of course, with love, because this is the thing. Proper communication is with love, already with the fourth chakra taken under consideration, not just the first three, but also the fourth one. Normally, if someone is psychic, that doesn't mean that person has the fourth chakra open or third or second. It doesn't mean that. Usually our second and third are congested very much. And the fourth one, yeah, it could be developed. It could be not that well developed. But everyone who is a psychic healer, a psychic person who does readings, we usually do it with heart, right? We usually do it with love, and that's the right way of doing it. So all the world of meeting other beings in another galaxies and other times channeling, seeing through what's going on and hearing, this is all the fifth dimension. I happen to have ascended masters come to me before I knew who they were, come to me when my consciousness was moving through and moving through the fifth dimension. So it depends. Some of us channel spirits, guides. You know yourself, there are so many ways of doing it, and there are so many people who are just able to feel energy and tell what that energy means. So that's the sense of the fifth dimension. Performing arts, music, part of performing arts, not all of it. Some of it belongs to the sixth chakra as well, but mainly beautiful sounds and sound healing, that's all the fifth dimension. Travel, out-of-body experiences is usually what people experience when their consciousness either reaches the fifth dimension or that chakra opens up because of some kind of situation. It suddenly opens up and they're able to have out-of-body experiences. So that's that incredible, magical world of the fifth dimension. And the sixth one is vision and intuition. And during my experience, I could tell that dimension has many layers, and incredibly important things happen during the passage of our consciousness through through that dimension. This is the third eye, the chakra, the sixth chakra of vision and intuition. Some of us have the sixth chakra open. We see visions and we intuitively interpret them. And visionaries are there, of course. And that's the first thing that happens when our consciousness reaches the sixth chakra. That intuitive understanding is something that has to do with seeing. So, for example, visual arts happen when we paint, when we draw. The way we do it, it's the amount of understanding and comprehension that goes into the process of painting is so much faster than our mind can our logical third chakra mind can follow. Intuition is fast. It happens when you ask question, you get answered before the question is finished. It's instant. It's because it does not have time either. The fifth chakra does not have time either. It does. They're all eternal dimensions. So visual arts, visual understanding of symbols, sacred symbols, sacred geometry, and all kinds of concepts. This is where we're getting towards the moment when our self-inquiry, which is asking questions and receiving answers, to put it simply, is operating in full force. This is when we start to comprehend creation. And this is what my experience was when I had that epiphany 4 years before I had my Kundalini rising experience, when I saw into another dimension. And it is known, the Merkaba, the two tetrahedrons, one on top of another, this supposedly looking into a Merkaba, you're supposed to be able to see into other dimensions. And this is what happened to me without knowing anything about Merkaba or tetrahedrons or that fact that that's a possibility. I simply had some angles there in my drawing that allowed me for that to happen. And it happened in full consciousness. I was fully aware of it. That's the sixth chakra, understanding through vision, and then also understanding through concepts and structures that are psychic structures, like astrology, psychic sciences, I call them, astrology, numerology, tarot cards, any form of divination. It's not anymore a process that we do together when we receive energy from somewhere and we exchange that energy. It's not kind of happening with others. This is already very clearly time when we are doing it on our own. It's our own investigation. That's why it's called self-inquiry in that comprehend the vision in the process of Kundalini rising. Once we comprehend the vision through our intuition, and we get, because it's different than with our third chakra mind. That mind always doubts. That mind says maybe. That mind is always needs to have all these proofs and this and that, and it's still going to be skeptical. And it depends on beliefs and depends on circumstances and all that, what that mind is going to figure out. But the intuition is certain. There is no doubt in there. I don't think it was a yellow figure that I saw. No, it was for sure blue, right? There is no doubt. There is no doubt in what we see. There is no doubt in the vision, and there is no doubt if the answer comes. It's not maybe. It's never maybe. It's always certainty. And then if that comprehension of vision is done and we intuitively understand, but not only intuitively, because our mind is present, our regular mind is present in that investigation all the time. I'm talking about the process of Kundalini rising. At certain point, we realize that we are, that our lives are already created in another dimension, in that sixth dimension. That's where not only concepts are born, not only psychic sciences and other sciences and archetypes. It's also where our life is being coded. And all that we're living through in this daily reality we experience, it's already happened. It's already been designed in a dimension that has no time. So just one of the things that's really incredible about it is that we just worry so much about what will happen, but there is not that much need to worry because it's happened already anyway. And everything we think, we were supposed to think. Everything we've experienced, we were supposed to experience that. So the only thing that we need to do is to practice so we can get through those experiences with love and with understanding that our soul created us. And this is another thing that's really important that happens in the sixth dimension. Let me have a sip of water.
Yeah, I have to apologize if anybody hears kind of rumbling going on. One of my cats is so attracted to your voice that he's just sitting here purring into my microphone. So, it's kind of like it's. Yeah, I mean, he's going like he's never done this before, but he will not leave. So, I think one of the most interesting things that what you're talking about, people can observe when a piece of art and it doesn't have to be a painting. It can be a piece of music, or it can be a piece of jewelry, or it can be a garden, or whatever. But you can tell the difference between an artist and a technician.
Mm.
A technician can create something that is very pretty. An artist puts their spirit into it. And when the spirit is there, it has the element of magic. And I think in many ways I have found when even going through museums and looking at artwork, you can tell who was a technician and who was an artist, who put spirit into what they were doing. And music the same way. You can listen to a piece of music that is first of all, you can listen to a piece of music that's been created magically. And to me, magic is using spirit. But also, whoever is performing it is either a technician or an artist. And I think that there's a difference here between, are you going to work with spirit or are you going to work with ego?
Right. Very, exactly. This is what I'm talking about, that we are, for the most part, unfortunately, closed up in that ego structure of the first three dimensions. But for artists, the upper chakras often are open. It doesn't mean that the lower ones are clear and not congested. That's not, necessarily the case, of course. But the upper chakras, if they're open, music and either sound or vision, that's the fifth and the sixth chakra. And everything starting from the fourth chakra, starting from the fourth dimension introduces us to the sacredness. This is where, from that moment on, everything above is sacred. So everything is, that's why we can feel spirit in art. That's why it's there, because it just opens up our upper chakras, and those chakras are already, they're all sacred. Everything is spiritual, everything is consciousness, but on the first three levels, on the material, emotional, and mental, we don't necessarily feel it. If we have the upper chakras open, then we know that there is sacredness to life, and that there is magic, as you said, absolutely. In the fifth dimension, already receiving the grace, which is being realizing that love is there all the time, and that each of us is love. That's already a sacred connection, and then all the magic of healing, of performing, the magic of performance, the magic of music, and then the magic of understanding of sacred symbols, sacred geometry, astrology, numerology, and then we have also the archetypes. And in that sixth dimension, there are also gods, deities. That's where it's at. And religions as well. Religions are conceived in the sixth dimension. It's that incredibly creative. I mean, they both are, the fifth and the sixth. But the sixth one, it's more an exchange of energy. The fifth one is more the exchange of energy. And the sixth one is the vision that we interpret already on our own. This is our own journey. And this is the journey that when we already clear mind, the third chakra is cleared, there is no emotional problems. Our personal life is resolved by the time we get to the sixth chakra, if our consciousness is able to break through all of the chakras below.
Is it also, when you come to the fourth chakra, is that where the element of surrender is to spirit?
Surrender because
the first three, our ego, has something to do with stuff. But you get to the fourth dimension and you surrender to spirit, and you allow spirit to guide you as opposed to you controlling it.
The magic of the consciousness moving through the third chakra involves certain steps, and the mind is just, no matter what kind of mind it is, a bright mind or not very bright mind, It doesn't matter. As long as it's a mature mind and trained enough that it can focus, the mind can focus on one thought. The mind that can focus on one thought is a good mind. It's very hard to do, but the mind that can do that is the mind that is able to experience transcendence. And the thing is that in our lives, the way the surrender happens, it has to do with surrendering the mind. Once the mind is surrendered, then the movement, the condition in the third chakra stops, and Kundalini goes naturally. Our consciousness naturally reaches heart. See, the surrender is the surrender of the ego, the surrender of the mind. It's extremely hard to do. It's so hard to do because our mind constantly wants to be right.
Well, and you know, the destiny pathway that we have for each lifetime is determined before we enter into the lifetime.
Well,
so
yeah, our soul has created it already.
Right. Yeah. So that there is a blueprint at play, even though it isn't what our intellect thinks would be the appropriate or best or whatever. And in your case, you were able to just flow with where it carried you. So many people are so controlled by society, by parents, by the culture, by dogma and religion, that they have to fight to get back to their individuality. And
if we understand, please go. Yeah.
Oh no, go ahead.
Well, I was just agreeing with you completely. I was just saying that it's helpful to know that everything that happens around us and our life story and all of that, it's all inside of us. So we have created it all. Our soul has created that. It's only clear at the time when we are in the Sixth Chakra. So let me just finish about the Sixth Chakra, what it brings to when consciousness goes through the Sixth Chakra, we are at some point realizing that time is a concept as well that was created, and our life is already, just like you said, designed. It's already created. It's already known. We were chasing our shadows basically all our life and trying to get things done and rushing and get frustrated when we don't get things done and so on. But that's just the first three dimensions. All the other ones have no time, and the truth is that our life is already there, and already there, designed. So there is no reason to worry too much about it. And the next level of the process of Kundalini going through the Sixth Chakra is after realizing that we are designed, coded, conceptualized. Each life is already created for us. It's done. It was for me kind of, I was a little disappointed to find that out, that we're farmed on the grid, and it was, by then I didn't know yet what's going to happen next, of course. But the next thing that happens after you realize that your life is designed and the time is concept and all that is not such a big deal, because at this moment your soul self-realizes. It's a very, very important, extremely important. It's so important. It's like life, death, and self-realization. self-realization is more important than life and death. So your soul self-realizes as we realize that we are eternal, and we have created our own life. So you, me, everyone has created our own life. And once that moment happens, you have a choice. You can do anything you want. You're free from all that material world and your life story and your lifetimes, and you're free from all of that, and you still feel, you still have energy. So self-inquiry still happens at that moment when soul exists in its own self-realization. It's self-realized, and it can become anything it wants. It can become a god if it wants to. For me personally, that wasn't that interesting to me.
But when you get to that point, becoming a god is silly because you're already a god. So it's what you think on an intellectual level no longer is important because there's a spiritual level that
of course
ascends beyond it.
Of course, we're beyond, because it's not so easy to understand all these dimensions, because we are translating it through the third chakra, through the mind, and everyone can understand it a little differently depending what their understanding is already. And that dimension of the sixth chakra, that's where the creation takes place. That's where things manifest from conceptual to eventually to material, and that's where all these concepts are in that sixth dimension, and we can you see, if our consciousness doesn't go through the seventh chakra, it doesn't go out of our body, we just opening of the sixth chakra without Kundalini rising, or with Kundalini rising and the sixth and our consciousness for some time staying in the sixth chakra and then going back down, that can leave us being some religious fanatics, start a new religion, because gods are there, very real. Archetypes, gods are archetypes, like everything is archetype. These are all archetypes. Reality is an illusion, and it's there so we can go get through it. and in the sixth chakra, all that comes to this conclusive stance where we understand that these are all concepts and time is included, but all outside, beyond all that, there is our incredible soul that lived through all those eons of lifetimes, and it creates all the time. Each of our souls is so creative. It creates life. It creates our life. But I was wondering, I know you read my book, so that was when I asked that question about the soul. That was the last question I could ask. I asked, where does the soul get its energy from? Right? Because there it is, and it exists. And it exists. The only thing that soul says, it says, I am. I know that you can read about this I am in many sources, and God is supposed to say that, and And I don't know who else was supposed to say that, but this is the moment of self-realization of the soul. And the soul says, I am. That the consciousness, an individual unit of consciousness, that each of us is unmistakable identity with the soul that we are, that comprehends so much more than in our lives we are able to learn from books or school or anything. That soul has created all that we're going through. And as you know, I asked that question, where does soul get its energy? And I don't know, should I say the answer or should I leave it a secret? I say the answer?
No. Say the answer.
Okay. So I asked, where does the soul get its inspiration? I blew it. Gets its energy from, and the answer came right away: inspiration.
Yes.
So you see, in this that moment was the last question I could ask, and my consciousness shot out into a blinding light, and there was no more questions but full consciousness of being the creator and being united with a creator. It's not a describable state, but one thing, as I already said, is that self-inquiry leads to spiritual enlightenment. And the moment of being united with all there is way beyond any knowledge. You can't ask any questions. You can't have any thoughts. The thoughts are not important and needed anymore. Nothing is needed because you are in present time creating in bliss. So there is not that much about the seventh chakra at the moment of passing through the consciousness, moving through it. But the seventh chakra is all about, it's another mind. I call it pure intellect. I call the third chakra mind, or goal-oriented mind, that we use daily, that's necessary for us to function in the physical reality. But there is this other mind, the philosophical mind, the seventh chakra that so many spiritual teachers have had and have opened and are able to make others take notice of a philosophical thought, of all these thoughts that come from pure witnessing, observing, not for a goal. There is no goal in there. Just observing actively and discerning.
Well, it's sort of a cosmic consciousness. I wouldn't call it a mind, but I would call it consciousness, a cosmic consciousness that it's a source of all creation.
Right. Yeah. So that's the in our individual on the individual journey, that seventh chakra can open up if we do practice cultivating the seventh chakra. And that cultivation is through witnessing, observing, and discerning without trying to use it for something. And it's a mind that's detached from issues that need to be resolved on the third chakra level. It's a contemplation. So we are not taught that in school, and we are taught to do things on purpose and make money and get this done and get that done and have ambition to get here and be better than that one and this one and not to be a failure and then all that stuff. But it's the mind. I call it pure intellect. This is what I pick because it is not so. It's not a function that's devoid of conclusive process. There is a process in there, and it's still individual at that point. Before, at the point when we are able to drop the ego and leave be released from our issues in life, emotionally and mentally, that's already a state of freedom. And knowledge that the mind can figure everything out and is a great, very well functioning computer without impediments. Because if it's all clear, the second and third chakra are clear. There's no problems that make us stuck, right? But it's a different. The seventh chakra is still on the individual level, not by the ego itself, not by the first three dimensions, but all of the being, including the mind and including intuition, including connection with others, including the great love that we feel, that we get and give. All these processes take place, but the seventh chakra is the one that comprehends it all.
Yes. Now I have to stop you because we're down to the last minute.
Oh, really? Already? Okay.
You've given us such an amazing amount of information. You guys can find Monique at MoniqueRebelle.com. Her book is on Amazon. Transcendence Calling, The Power of Kundalini Rising and Spiritual Enlightenment. And you guys should get it because there are directions in there. She went through real fast so much of the book, but if you read it and go through it step by step, you're going to find that there is enlightenment, and for some lucky members out there, the transcendence that everybody is seeking. Monique, thank you so much for being here and for sharing so much of your information with us tonight.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm so grateful to be able to just go off and tell you all that stuff. And my website, MoniqueRebelle.com. There is more information, and I'm writing a new book about dimensions, about going in depth into every dimension. Hopefully, it will be published still this year. We'll see.
Well, we'll have to check it out. We'll have to check. When it is published, let me know. I'll read another book,
sure will.
And we'll get you back on. Thanks so much again.
Good
night
now. Thank you so much, Barbara. Good night.
Okay, everybody, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Check us out on YouTube. If you like what you hear, please subscribe. Have a wonderful evening, and we will see you. Well, we'll listen to you. We'll hear from you next week. Thanks a lot, and good night.